welcome back to the kitchen. This week we're going to be making a recipe called creamed spinach. This version comes from a website called Love and Lemons. I'm going to be putting a link to that website below. Actually, they had a lot of really good fall sounding recipes on there, so I'm going to be making a few recipes from that website over the next few weeks. Alright, so for our creamed spinach, we're going to need obviously spinach. The recipe calls for fresh, but I have the frozen here, which I put in the refrigerator overnight to thaw out. So I'm going to try it that way instead. Also, they call for shallots. The store was out of shallots, so I'm going to be using a yellow onion. Shallots are in the onion family, so it should be similar. Alright, we're also going to be using a little bit of cornstarch. That's to make the sauce a little bit thicker. And heavy cream for the same reason. If you want to go vegan, you can also replace this with full-fat coconut milk. A little bit of Dijon mustard, olive oil to start with, lemon juice, which we're going to squeeze fresh, some sea salt, and black pepper. Alright, I think that's everything. Let's get started. First off, it says that we need to cook our spinach in olive oil and then squeeze all the water out of it after that. I brought my big strainer to do that. I'm going to open this up and see. I might need to strain it even before cooking it, depending on how watery it looks in there after thawing overnight. Alright, I think we're just going to cook it like they said and then strain it because I don't think it looks too watery. Alright, I'm going to turn up my skillet temperature to about medium. On this one it has a little dial, so I've set it to 300, so we'll just see how that goes. Alright, we're going to heat up some olive oil. We're going to let that get a little bit hot first, and then we're going to add our spinach. And then it says toss until just wilted. So since obviously ours is frozen, which has been thawing overnight, it already obviously looks pretty wilted. So I think I'll just saute it for a few minutes until it seems like it's hot, and we'll call that good. Also, it calls for 1 pound, but I thought it would be, I wasn't sure if it would seem like enough, what with it being already frozen, so I'm going to do 2 pounds. Alright, I think I can smell this oil getting ready, but a good way to test if your pan is hot enough is just flick some water, and then you see it sizzle. That means it's hot enough. I turned the heat down to give me a chance to scrape the last of the spinach out of the bag. It was pretty hard, but I got most of it. So we're going to turn the heat back up, and now we're going to saute. The word saute comes from the French sauter. It means to jump. So it just means you're making the food move around constantly on the pan. Okay, so the spinach is now hot. I felt it carefully to make sure. And some of the liquid has cooked off. So we're going to put it in the strainer and squeeze out the excess liquid. Now since I'm using an electric skillet, I'm going to be careful to grab it on the side where the control is, so that when the liquid seeps out of this side, it's not going to get the electric controls wet. If you don't do this step, the final product will be watery, which you don't want, obviously. Alright, I can still hear liquid running out, so I'm going to keep going. Alright, I think that's good. So the next step is that we're going to wipe out our pan and cook the shallot, which I'm replacing with the onion. Alright, I'm cutting on a glass plate here. I recommend cutting on a cutting board, but I don't have one here at the library, so I'm just going to use this plate. Really, you shouldn't, because you could risk damaging your plate, but I'll be careful. This is my knife from home, though, because the library's knives are not that great. Definitely you want to use a knife that's good, because if you're using a knife that's dull, it's going to make it easier to cut yourself. Actually, surprisingly, a sharp knife is safer than a dull knife, because a dull knife you're more likely to slip and then cut yourself. Alright, so this recipe calls for 1 shallot. A shallot, they're like about that big, I think. I've seen them before, but I haven't cooked with them. So I'm gonna do about 1/4 of this onion. Maybe a little more since I'm doubling it. I think that much will be good to replace 1 shallot. Save the rest for later. When you hold the piece of fruit or vegetable to cut, you should curve your fingers. So that way, if the knife slips, it's less likely to snip your fingertip if they're curved under. Then also, you can see the onion is slanting a little bit this way. So I'm always going to cut on the side that's slanting away from me. Because if I hold it like this and cut it, the onion is slanting that way. So if I slip, I'm more likely to cut myself. But if I hold it and cut this way, if I slip, it's more likely to slice that way. Then when it starts to get really small like that, sometimes I just move my finger out of the way totally and just do like that. Make it smaller pieces. This recipe calls for 2 garlic cloves minced. Okay, so if you don't know, this is the garlic bulb, the whole thing. A clove is each little section. So it's calling for 2 cloves. So we're going to break off 1, 2. Alright, and now we're going to peel those and chop them. It's got a skin on it, pretty much like an onion. So you just have to peel off the outer skin. There are some different tricks to make peeling it off easier, but honestly I don't remember any of the tricks right now. So we're just going to peel it off like this. So it's going to be minced. Now there is a little tool that you can use. It's called a garlic press. You just put the garlic in, squeeze the press shut, and the garlic comes out the other end, kind of like one of those tools that kids used to play with Play-Doh. I don't have one of those, so I'm just gonna mince it up tiny by hand like this. Okay, now we also have to have our coconut milk or heavy cream ready, so I've got that. I'll just open it a while. Alright, there's the mustard. Now we're also gonna need the lemon juice. A good way to get the juices flowing first is to roll the lemon on the counter like this, and then slice it. Alright, now we need to mix 2 tablespoons of the cornstarch. Yes, 2 tablespoons because we're doubling this recipe. The original calls for 1 tablespoon. This is only a half tablespoon, so I'm going to do 2 of these and then 2 more. Alright, 1 tablespoon. And 2 tablespoons. And now we're going to mix that with 4 tablespoons of warm water. By the way, this cornstarch, if you're not familiar with this, you can buy this in the baking aisle, and it's different from corn flour, so just make sure you don't get it mixed up. Cornstarch is really fine like this. I'm going to turn it up to about medium again. Add some olive oil. The recipe does say to saute for 5 to 8 minutes until they're soft. It normally doesn't take me that long for onions, so I'm thinking that maybe shallots are harder than onions and take longer to get soft. Because these are just about ready. I'm just going to heat them back up. And then I'm going to keep adding the rest of the ingredients in the order that the recipe says. Alright, and finally 4 teaspoons of lemon juice, since I'm doubling the recipe. And I'll save the rest of this for another recipe. And actually, the recipe did call for adding salt while cooking the onions or shallots, and I forgot to do that, so I'm going to add a little extra right now. Plus my pepper. Okay, this is so good. I think anybody that likes spinach will devour this, and I think that even a lot of people who don't think they like spinach will still like this. Obviously, I think this is probably best served hot right away. If you do have leftovers, you can put it in an airtight container in the refrigerator. Make sure it's cool first before you seal it in the container. And then I would finish it within about 5 days or so. And I think I'm going to be making this for Thanksgiving as a contribution to the family Thanksgiving. I hope you enjoyed this recipe, and we'll see you next week in the kitchen. Bye!